buzz of the chainsaw was a high-pitched metallic scream that seemed to be cutting through the very fabric of my peaceful new life. It was followed by the splintering crack of wood, a sound of pure, senseless destruction. On my brand new private pier, the pier that had been the single biggest reason I bought this house. A crew of rough-looking men in work shirts were preparing to dismantle it, piece by piece. And standing on the edge of my lawn, supervising the demolition with a look of smug, victorious satisfaction on her face, was Brenda, the president of the Regatta Bay Homeowners Association. A sheriff's deputy stood by, his arms crossed, a neutral observer there, only to keep the peace. He was holding the fraudulent HOA abatement order that Brenda had waved in his face. It was all perfectly, horribly legal on the surface. Just then, a convoy of heavy industrial trucks rumbled down our quiet, exclusive street. A massive flatbed carrying rolls of 10-foot-tall chain-link fencing, a truck with a hydraulic post-hole digger, and a dozen more workmen in hard hats. They didn't stop at my house. They continued down to the grand stone entrance of the sprawling Regatta Bay Marina, the centerpiece of our community, and began to unload. Their movements swift and professional. Brenda looked over, a flicker of annoyance on her face at this new disruption. I just gave her a slow, quiet smile. "Don't worry, Brenda," I said, my voice calm and clear over the sound of the chainsaw. "They're with me." She stared at me, then at the trucks, a look of pure, uncomprehending confusion on her face. She had no idea what was happening. She thought this was her moment of triumph, and that's when everything went wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment. What would you do if this happened to you? And subscribe to HOA Files. 2. Understand that moment of beautiful, glorious chaos. You have to understand the deal I made. My name is Alex. For the last 10 years, my life has been a blur of code, of venture capital meetings, of the relentless 20-4-hour-a-day grind of building a successful tech company from the ground up. Yeah, I was successful beyond my wildest dreams, but I was also burned out, exhausted, and desperate for a life that didn't involve a screen and a standing desk. My dream was a simple one, a quiet house on a lake, a place where the only deadline was the sunset. I found it at Regatta Bay. It was the perfect property. It's a beautiful modern house on a large, secluded lot with its own magnificent private deep water pier, big enough for the sailboat I planned to buy. It was perfect. But there was a catch. The owner was an elderly man named Mr. Harrison, whose family had owned this land for generations. He was finally ready to retire and move to a warmer climate. But he wouldn't sell me just the house. He would only sell it as a package deal with his family's other much larger property, which happened to be right next door, the sprawling 100-slip Regatta Bay Marina. It was a massive, complex, and very expensive commercial property. I wasn't looking to get into the marina business, but I wanted the house, and this was the only way. So I did the deal. And because I value my privacy above all else, I did it quietly. I had my lawyers create a holding company, a faceless entity, called Lakewind Properties LLC. The LLC bought both the house and the marina in a single, quiet transaction. On paper, my new home was owned by a corporation. The marina was owned by the same corporation. No one, least of all the residents of the Regatta Bay HOA, had any idea who was behind it. The queen of this lakeside kingdom was the HOA president, Brenda. Brenda was a woman who seemed to have a deep and profound resentment for anyone younger or more successful than her. She was a socialite, an arbiter of taste, and a tyrant of the highest order. She saw the community not as a neighborhood, but as her own personal yacht club. She was its perpetually unimpressed commodore. Our first meeting was on my move-in day. She didn't come to welcome me. She came to issue a proclamation. She marched onto my new deck, looked at my large, beautiful, and perfectly legal private pier, and wrinkled her nose. "I'm Brenda," she announced, not bothering with pleasantries. "The president of the association. I see the old Harrison Pier is still standing. That will have to be dealt with. It's excessively large, and it's not in compliance with our new aesthetic and material standards, which were updated last year. You'll be expected to submit a plan for its significant modification. or its complete removal to the Architectural Review Committee within 30 days. I was stunned. I hadn't even unpacked my boxes, and she was already telling me to tear down the single best feature of my new property. I believe the pier was grandfathered in, I said politely. It's been here for 30 years. Her eyes narrowed. Hey, we don't do grandfathered here, mister. Oh, Alex, I said. Alex? She repeated, the name sounding like an insult on her lips. We are a community of progress, of constant improvement, not a museum of old, decaying structures. 30 days. She turned and left, her message delivered. The war had begun. The first formal violation notice arrived a week later. $500 fine for the non-compliant pier. It was followed by a barrage of other, equally ridiculous fines. A fine because the boat I had rented while waiting for my new one to be delivered was apparently the wrong color for the community's aesthetic. A fine for the unapproved brand of Adirondack chairs I had placed on the end of my pier. It was a clear, coordinated campaign of harassment, designed to make me bend to her will. My inner monologue was a mixture of disbelief and a slow-burning anger. I had come here for peace, for an escape from the cutthroat world of business. And I had landed in a petty suburban version of the same thing. Then Brenda escalated. She sent a letter from the HOA's lawyer, a man who was clearly on her payroll. The letter was a work of fiction, claiming that my pier, which was in a deep-water cove, was a navigational hazard and a serious safety liability to the community. It threatened to have the pier condemned by the county and forcibly removed if I did not comply with her demands. This was no longer just a harassment. This was a direct, legal threat to my property. I hired my own lawyer, and in the meantime, I started to pay more attention to the way the residents of Regatta Bay, and Brenda in particular, treated the marina. They acted like they owned it. They would demand that the staff, my staff, catered to their every whim. They would leave trash on the docks, would park their cars in the fire lanes. They saw the marina not as a private business they were patrons of, but as their own personal yacht club, community-owned asset that they were entitled to. I decided to go to the next HOA meeting to confront Brenda and the board directly. It was a disaster. The room was full of her cronies. I tried to make a calm, reasonable case, explaining that my pier was safe, legal, and predated her new rules. Brenda was dismissive and condescending. She publicly shamed me in front of the entire room. Mr. Alex, she said, her voice dripping with mock pity, is a newcomer to our community. He's from the city. He doesn't yet understand our ways, our commitment to excellence and visual harmony. She spoke about me as if I weren't even there. He believes that his personal desires outweigh the collective good of the community. But here at Regatta Bay, we are a team.
Yes.
And he needs to decide if he wants to be on the team or if he wants to be a problem. The board, her loyal puppets, voted unanimously to authorize her to take all necessary and appropriate action to abate the nuisance of my pier. It was a blank check for her to continue her war against me. The final blow came a week later. Another certified letter from her lawyer. They had taken the board's vote and run with it. It was a formal notarized notice that the HOA, using its abatement power, had scheduled a professional demolition crew to come and forcibly remove my pier. The date was set for 48 hours from then. My lawyer immediately filed for an emergency injunction to stop them. But the only local judge who could sign it was, unbelievably, on a fishing trip in Alaska for the week. There was no one to stop them, was powerless. I was going to have to stand by and watch as they destroyed a $100,000 feature of my property. It felt like a total, crushing, and complete defeat. Brenda had won, and that brings us back to that terrible morning. The buzz of the chainsaw, the splintering of the beautiful redwood planks of my pier, Brenda standing on my lawn like a conquering general, a smug, vindictive smile on her face, the sheriff's deputy, there to ensure I didn't interfere with the legal destruction of my own property. But as I stood there, watching the beginning of the end, my mind was not on the pier. It was on the other property, the marina, the place they all took for granted. And a plan, a beautiful, terrible, and perfectly legal plan, began to form in my mind. As the first chainsaw bit into the first piling of my pier, the convoy of commercial fencing trucks arrived. They rolled past my house, their sheer size, and industrial nature, a shocking contrast to the pristine residential street. Brenda looked up, her expression of smug victory turning to one of annoyed confusion. "What is this? Hey, what's going on?" I stepped forward, a thick legal document. "In my hand, officer," I said to the deputy, my voice calm and steady. "Before your men proceed any further, I believe you need to see this." It was the deed, not for my house, for the 20-acre commercial property next door, the one that encompassed the entire Regatta Bay Marina, the parking lot, the boat launch, the clubhouse, everything. The owner was listed, clear as day, Lakewind Properties LLC. I then handed him the articles of incorporation for the LLC, which listed the sole owner and managing director. Me. The deputy's eyes went wide. He understood. Brenda, however, was still catching up. "What is this?" she snapped. "What does the marina have to do with this?" "Everything, Brenda," I said, a cold, hard smile on my face. "You see, you thought this was a fight about my pier, a little squabble over your aesthetic rules. But you've made a terrible miscalculation. My pier is my private personal property. The Regatta Bay Marina, on the other hand, is a private business, a business that I happen to own." I then turned to the foreman of the fencing crew, who had been waiting for my signal. "You can begin," I said, my voice ringing out with a newfound authority. "I want a 10-foot commercial-grade security fence, with 3 strands of barbed wire on top, around the entire perimeter of the marina property. Main gate, service entrance, everything. I want it sealed. No one in number. One out." I then turned back to a now pale and trembling Brenda. I handed her a thick stack of envelopes. "These," I said, my voice like ice, "are legally binding. 24-hour lease termination notices for every single member of your homeowners association who currently rents a slip in my marina. This," I said, handing her one last beautiful document, "is a formal notice that the long-standing, informal access agreement between the marina and the HOA for the use of the boat launch is now terminated, effective immediately. Your residents have 24 hours to get their boats out. After that, the only way their million-dollar yachts are getting out of my marina is with a helicopter." The world seemed to stop. The chainsaw on my pier sputtered and died. Demolition crew just stared. The sheriff's deputy was now looking at Brenda with a new, deeply unsympathetic expression. Dum-duh. Brenda looked like her entire world had just been vaporized in front of her eyes. The community was thrown into a state of absolute glorious chaos. Their boats, the very symbol of their affluent lakefront lifestyle, were now hostage in a marina that was owned by the quiet new tech bro they had tried to bully and destroy. The man whose pier she was trying to tear down? Brenda was a social pariah within hours. Her phone began to melt with furious, screaming calls from her neighbors. Her obsession with my single private pier had just cost the entire community their access to the lake. She was publicly and brutally finished. A terrified, humbled, and completely new delegation from the HOA board Brenda was, of course, nowhere to be seen, came to my house that evening. They didn't make demands. They begged Alex there. New interim president said, his voice trembling slightly, "Please, we are so sorry. This was all Brenda. She went rogue. What do we have to do to fix this?" I had my terms ready. 1. The HOA will immediately cease and desist all demolition activities and will pay, in full, for the complete professional repair of any damage done to my pier. 2. They will also pay for a brand new, top-of-the-line, hydrohoist boat lift for the pier as a small token of their apology. 3. The new bylaw regarding piers will be publicly and officially rescinded, and a new permanent bylaw will be written, explicitly exempting my property from any and all current and future aesthetic regulations. 4. The HOA will sign a new, very expensive, and very strict master access agreement for the use of my marina, with a large portion of the proceeds going to a local youth sailing program. They agreed to everything. Instantly, my pier was repaired. My new boat lift was installed. And the marina, my marina, reopened under a new, much more respectful management structure. This whole insane affair taught me a powerful lesson about the world of wealth and power. People who are obsessed with the surface of things, with appearances and aesthetics, often fail to see the real, underlying structure of the world right in front of them. Brenda was so fixated on winning a petty, meaningless battle over the look of my pier that she never ever bothered to ask who owned the entire harbor. She tried to take away my little piece of the lake, not realizing that I held the keys to the whole damn thing. Brenda and her husband were forced to sell their house and move away in disgrace. Unable to face the daily scorn of the neighbors, she had betrayed. But her brother, a powerful state senator, has just introduced a new piece of legislation to study the feasibility of using eminent domain to convert certain key, privately owned marinas on public access lakes into state-run recreational facilities for the public good.